Speaking of speculation, I'm not going to get too deep into color and symbolism for this video, but you might want to take note of how often Marty, as well as the other characters, are dressed in some combination of red, white, and blue, in conjunction with black or gray, pretty much throughout the entire film. Are the filmmakers implying something, like America and its citizens needing to reconsider its past to shape a more promising future? And might they be implying that the stakes are as high for us as they are for Marty, and that failing to become the best version of ourselves could consign us to a terrible fate if we manage to survive at all? I think so. And if you believe in that subtext, it should hardly be offensive or controversial.
Wait a minute, Doc. What are you talking about? What happens to us in the future? What, do we become assholes or something?
No, Marty. Both you and Jennifer turn out fine. It's your kids, Marty. Something has got to be done about your kids.
People who write off these kind of cinematic details to coincidence are sometimes right. But I have my doubts that the highly creative minds behind works like this would leave creative considerations like costumes, color, and set design to chance, at least if they can help it. Creatives tend to be deliberate people who want to exercise as much control as they can get, and they're in the precise position to do just that. But let's get back to our characters. Before Back to the Future, Christopher Lloyd was probably best known as Jim, a drug-wasted cab driver from the TV sitcom Taxi. The role of Doc, or Dr. Emmett Brown, demanded a character actor capable of effortless zaniness, and it's high praise to Christopher Lloyd in pointing out just how easily he drops the most stunned and bugged-out reaction every time the plot asks for it, which is to say, quite often. But like this film, Doc Brown isn't one-dimensional either. And this movie's touching moments don't feel tacked on. They feel integral and sincere, and they take this film a step beyond comedy. This works because we like Doc, and we like Marty, and because their writing and portrayal earns these characters our approval.
Hey, you, get your damn hands off her. You really think I ought to swear?
George's character borders on caricature, and he manages to be even sillier than Doc because of his emotionally arrested state, a state which is explained and made narratively logical when Marty travels back to his father's adolescence. George's silliness is used for its share of laughs, but it's not unconsidered or unearned. Also, in order to serve the plot, George's silliness needs to scale in proportion to Biff, his workplace supervisor and spiritual rival, who also borders on caricature.
Biff just happens to be my supervisor, and I'm afraid I'm just not very good at confrontations.
Glover's performance adds to Back to the Future's silly, flexible backbone.
I'm George McFly. I'm your density.
And given that this is, among other things, a comedy, I see no reason to penalize this film for being intentionally light and adding a double-stuffed layer of levity through character.
Hey, you, get your damn hands off her. You really think I ought to swear?
But again, don't let this film's levity fool you. It's saying more than it lets on. We know that the version of George that the film introduces us to is stuck in neutral. But notice how the filmmakers reflect that with wardrobe. He's even dressed in neutrals. The adult 1985 version of George McFly looks like a transplant from the 1950s because George is in a holding pattern with no time machine or sufficient will of his own. Although it's overused, the term NPC definitely applies here.
I'm telling you, George, if you do not ask Lorraine to that dance, I'm going to regret it for the rest of my life.
What I love about this is how George's plight must be resolved through his son's intervention.
That's why we got to show her that you, George McFly, are a fighter. You're somebody who's going to stand up for yourself. Yeah, but I've never picked a fight in my entire life. Look, you're not going to be picking a fight, Dad. Daddy-o. you're coming to a rescue, right?
What starts with Marty's justified, selfish need to return home quickly develops into heartfelt concern and greater appreciation for his father's particular challenge.
Oh, you make it sound so easy. I wish I wasn't so scared. George, there's nothing to be scared of. All it takes is a little self-confidence. If you put your mind to it, you can accomplish anything.
Sure, this isn't Star Wars, but this is a variation of that theme, a father's redemption via his son. So just call him Marty Skywalker, or Calvin Skywalker, if you catch the reference. Marty's intervention works, and in the updated 1985 timeline, George and Lorraine are happier and more satisfied with life. George is considerably more confident and has pursued a career aligned with his passion and talent. And check out his appearance and updated getup. No longer stuck in the past, George is no longer a dork, and now wears a red shirt, reflecting his new assertiveness. Biff, on the other hand, circumstance in life has happened to him as well. His green tracksuit could be a way of communicating how the revised circumstances created by George's assertiveness have restrained Biff's aggressive tendencies. At heart, Biff still has a bully inside that wants to take shortcuts. But he's now made to submit, and all because George refused to be the victim of Biff and life for the next 30 years.
Now, Biff, I want to make sure that we get 2 coats of wax this time, not just 1.
Just finishing up the second coat now.
Now, Biff, don't con me.
I'm sorry, Mr. McFly. I meant I was just starting on the second coat.
And notice that beneath his jacket, Biff is still wearing a clashing red shirt. The green jacket may symbolize the balance that has been introduced to this new 1985, a timeline in which this bully's negative tendencies are suppressed, simply because the force of positive resistance showed up just in time. Pretty cool.
When I was your age, I never chased a boy or called a boy or sat in a parked car with a boy.
Leah Thompson does a great job as the not-so-innocent Lorraine. Her conflicts and contradictions are also well considered. Lorraine's fate lays at the intersection of youthful idealism and practical reality. What Lorraine once hoped would be a happy, vibrant life became disappointment sometime between 1955 and 85. Like George, Lorraine is not the best version of herself. Lorraine is clear about what she wants in a man. Someone who can take charge and lead. This was the 1950s, when social circumstances made this kind of calculated concession typical for women. Lorraine was content to be an enthusiastic co-pilot, if only someone could manage to live up to her ideals. She was hoping that someone would be George.
What are you looking at, butthead?
If George McFly represents the left-wing, brainy side of America, Biff is certainly its right-wing brawn. More critically, Biff is America's id, and sometimes in life, you need a little Biff or id to get things done. But a little is all you need, and it can never be allowed to take over. See Back to the Future, too, for that reality. Once again, notice the color choice for his clothing. In Back to the Future, Biff is literally a high school bully, and the film may very well be associating this archetype with America itself. You don't have to agree with this association, but this is how a lot of other countries regard us, and we'd be smart to at least consider it.
So why don't you make like a tree and get out of here?
In terms of how we relate to others, we're often stronger than smart, more cunning than kind, and at the same time, a bit too dumb for our own long-term good. And that's Biff, the audacious aspect of America that doesn't mind getting things done at the expense of everyone and everything else. When we first see Biff, he's wearing a tacky combination of a blue blazer with red shirt, with even tackier red, white, and blue plaid golf pants. Let's have a little fun and speculate further. In the case of Biff, the bold red shirt on the inside might indicate his aggressive edge, while his blue jacket is a figurative and literal cover for a phony, agreeable facade of an office working man. At work, Biff is an imposter. Since we know that Biff is having George write his work reports for him, this look is consistent with who he really is as a working adult. A man-child who is still cheating on his tests. Like George, Biff also hasn't developed beyond his high school character. He's merely moved to the 13th grade of his adult life.
Do you realize what would happen if I handed my reports in your handwriting? I'll get fired. You wouldn't want that to happen, would you? You realize what would happen if I hand in my homework in your handwriting? I'll get kicked out of school. You wouldn't want that to happen, would you?
Marty also wears a red shirt inside his blue jacket. Because Marty is assertive, but not a bully, his red shirt suggests an inner fight, characteristics that his milquetoast, neutral-toned father lacks at the beginning of the movie. People who are more skeptical about the kind of symbolic interpretation I'm offering here might reasonably protest that it's a cheat to give symbols and colors a convenient flexibility regarding their meaning based on who's wearing them and how. And while I appreciate the spirit behind that skepticism, and I'm happy to concede that symbolic interpretation is more of an art than a science, this is the nature of symbols and how symbolism works. If you spot a carpenter, dressed like a carpenter, crossing the street with a hammer in his hand, that hammer has a different meaning than a hammer in the hand of a man wearing a black ski mask. Symbolism requires context and is of little analytical accuracy and value without it. Any unwillingness or inability to integrate context affects our capacity to recognize patterns and extract meaning and value from them. Any film as good as Back to the Future that's earned its superlatives makes describing the acting in it as simply quite good seem like a backhanded compliment in comparison. It's not, and I don't intend to be dismissive here. In a decent film, good acting is sufficient. But in a great film, good acting leaves enough space for it to remain great. Good ensemble acting is more than good enough. It's essential in order to avoid undermining its greatness. This is when a hit song is made by the sum of its parts and not an indulgent solo. While the performances in Back to the Future are not Oscar-worthy, they are comedically and cohesively sound. And what's wrong with that? And why is dramatic acting so consistently regarded above comedic acting, when being serious is arguably easier than being funny? So many movies start off strong and can't close the deal. Disappointing closers vastly outnumber satisfying ones. I think we can all agree on that. So when we find a movie that lives up to the promise of the first two-thirds that precedes its final act, we know we have a potential classic in the making. For this rare treat of a film, so many things come together perfectly for the finale. Drama, suspense, action, acting, music, special effects. Not one element disappoints. As mentioned earlier, two very unlikely things have to happen for Marty to get home alive. First, Marty must get timid George to confront Biff in order to win Lorraine's affection. Because this must happen, the story invests the audience in George's success as much as Marty's. Like any father and son, their futures are intertwined, but this story, via role reversal, puts a little remix on that idea. Several times, we see George about to fall into the pattern of shrinking in the face of adversity. It isn't until Biff violently shoves Lorraine that George musters the anger to knock him out. And if all that wasn't enough, next, Marty must race to the clock tower, get behind the wheel of the DeLorean, and make contact with the makeshift tethered power cord at exactly 88 miles per hour, just as lightning strikes. Amazing. I'd say you can't make this stuff up, except someone did. Some interesting things occur to you when you're writing, and the term power cord that I just used 2 sentences ago made me realize another cool detail about this film that I didn't notice until writing this. I'm betting that the opening scene in Back to the Future was intended as foreshadowing for the ending scene at the clock tower. Perhaps someone else caught this, but I'm not going to watch 20 other videos to find out. But if this is true, it's one of several other Easter eggs or hidden details that time will not allow me to address here. I don't have a DeLorean, but perhaps I'll revisit this and other details of this film at some point in the future.